Away we go. Alrighty. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Small crowd tonight. And my name is Patrick Myers. I'm a psychologist, work right downstairs here. A place called Complement Healthcare. We've got a group of I guess you might call us alternate healthcare professionals, so chiropractor, massage therapy, naturopathy, psychology, those kinds of things, all right? So tonight I'm going to be talking a little bit about relationship life skills. I'm going to be covering a couple of things. So I'm going to cover a little bit about a couple of the elements that are required for a relationship, and then two of the problems that quite often arise in relationships and some of what I see as to how to solve those problems. One of the reasons why I put this one together is because at the end you'll see that I show you some resources, and I'm not entirely happy with the way that the resources, the literature out there, describes these two factors that I'm going to describe in a moment, alrighty? So it's, I guess that's why I'm doing that. So let's see, I think that's about it for that one. I'm just going to put these away. So we start off with some rather nasty statistics, and those are about, and again this is approximate, depends on who you read as to what numbers they give you, approximately 50% of first marriages these days end up in divorce, all right? Now that doesn't say how many of these first marriages who don't end up in divorce are happy with their marriage, but it just says that 50% end up in divorce. Then the number goes up from there. So approximately, again, give or take, about 70% of second marriages end up failing, and about 85% of third marriages end up failing. What also is not included in this is that the number of common law relationships is going up quite dramatically. So with all these numbers then we come to what I refer to as the marriage myth, all right? And the marriage myth is something that we've been taught since we were that high, and it still continues to this day. So, for example, we were read all kinds of little fairy tales when we were kids, right? I went to Les Miserables, the movie, on New Year's Day with a group of friends, and you know, horrible movie about all these horrible people having all this horrible time in life, and at the end of the movie, what do you have? You have guy and girl, and basically the message is, and they lived happily ever after. And I'm going, okay, you know, we also have the Beatles. They sing this song, you know, love is all we need and all this kind of stuff. And so I go, I think there's more that is required for a relationship than just love. There is also reality, and as a favorite author of mine says, Byron Katie, she says, whenever I argue with reality, I lose. But only 100% of the time. So here's my argument with respect to reality, and that is that to be successful in the long run, a relationship requires two elements. One is you gotta kind of like your partner. You kind of gotta like to love them, you know, be friends with them, these kinds of things, all right? So that's, everybody knows that part. The second part, though, is where I find a lot of people fall into the fantasy or the marriage myth, and that is a successful long-term relationship also requires work. It requires, you know, sitting down talking with your partner about tedious subjects, about painful subjects. Not always. Sometimes the work is pleasant, sometimes it is joyful, but sometimes it's tedious and painful. So this is true not only of our most intimate relationships, but it is true also of other relationships as well, all right? So I just want to point out that although specifically I am talking about couples, in reality I'm talking about basically any relationship, and that could be the relationship that you have with your grocery store clerk, you know, you go to buy something, a loaf of bread. Well, there's needs to be a trade there. There needs to be some work. I need to dig into my pocket, pull out some cash, and my cashier needs to stick my loaf of bread in a bag and give me change or whatever. So all relationships require work. So, about relationship work then, we say that, you know, it's not likely that you can lead the fairy tale life with your relationship. It's not likely that you are going to achieve 100% of what you want out of life, out of your relationship. It's just not realistic to be able to think that way. So sacrifices or compromises need to be made. And the way that I put it is that if both couples put in 50% of the work, right, then what happens is you're not going to achieve 100% of what you want. But perhaps we can achieve, I'm going to say if we work really hard, perhaps we can achieve 85%. All right? Now, if we take a look at that spread from 50 to 85, that's a 35% difference, or what I would call a 35% interest rate. Now, the question that I put out to everybody is show me a bank that gives you a 35% interest rate. It ain't out there, right? There's only one bank account that will give you the 35% interest, and that's the bank account of the heart. But the heart requires the work. And, you know, for example, if, say, for instance, we're trying to buy a house in the Lower Mainland, everyone knows how expensive it is here, you need two people, usually, to be able to afford a house here, right? Two incomes. To raise a child, to some degree, it's really useful to have two people. You know, you can tag team with each other and take care of these kids. It's a lot of work, all right? So, what might some of that work look like? So there are basically, when I see couples, although there are lots of places, specific places where couples can clash, I find that generally that they clash in two areas. And those two areas where they clash then are the two areas in which I find the literature to be a tiny bit on the weak side. And so this is where I'm putting this presentation out. And so one of those areas is we need to be clear in our communications, and the other is that we need to negotiate and renegotiate agreements. Okay? So, honey, when you say we can't communicate, what exactly do you mean? All right, so here comes the first question. So the first question is, if I ask you to listen to me, what will you do? If I ask you to listen to me, what will you do? If I ask you to listen to me, what will you do? Sorry?
Just listen.
You would just listen, sure. Any other?
Not talk.
You would not talk, sure. Okay. Anybody else offer some ideas? No? So you just listen, wouldn't talk. Right. And this is typical of what I hear from people when I'm sitting with people in the room. So I'm going to come back to listen in a little while, all right? Right now, I'm just going to talk about the fact that the need for clarity in communications comes about in that all too often I see people using the English language or your language of choice. And everybody knows that language. The problem is that we keep on missing each other in the language, all right? And what happens is that it's like two ships passing in the night and we don't end up connecting. The question is how to go about doing that connecting, all right? So now comes two more questions. And I'm going to let you know that the first question is not a trick question. The second question is a trick question. All So the first question is how many fingers on my hand? 5. Everybody agree 5? Okay. Let's make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So we can all see that there are 5 fingers on my hand. All right? Now comes the trick question. How does my hand feel? Right? And so typically when I ask couples this, I get all kinds of different answers. And they go, I don't know. Warm, sweaty, cold, hot. Some will even touch my hand and they'll go, smooth. But here's the problem. Everyone's going to give their own definitions of how my hand feels. The answer that I'm looking for, although not necessarily the right answer, but the answer that I'm looking for, how does my hand feel? Well, you'll notice that as I'm pulling my hand back, I'm stretching these tendons a lot. And so my hand feels stretched and it is getting fatigued. Now, with the how many fingers, that's something that's objective. We can actually see it, all right? With something like, how does my hand feel? A simple word like, how do we feel? Well, that's really subjective, and we can run into problems. And this is where I see couples running into problems, is when we start using these subjective terms. So it's really important that we attempt to, when we run into difficulties, one of the places to look is, do I understand what my partner is saying? Does my partner understand what I am saying? Now, I just noticed that you're writing some notes there. If you would like, although not all of it is on the handouts, but if you would like, write down the email address and I'll send you some color copies of the handouts, okay? My printer sort of went on the fritz, so it didn't want to work. So. All right. So I get lots of different things that couples tell me that they want from their partner, right? So I need to be able to trust you. I want your support. I need to know you love me. I want more stimulating sex. I want you to clean up after yourself. I want you to stop nagging me. I want you to respect me. I want you to be more affectionate. I want you to listen to me. All right? And I get lots of other ones when I see couples in session. So, what exactly does affectionate look like? Right? And everybody here knows the English term affectionate. It's part of the English dictionary. We've all run into that term, affectionate. So, here's a definition of affectionate. Monkeys show affection by picking bugs off each other. I'd settle for that. All right. So, every single one of us all had a very unique upbringing. We all had a parent or two, right? We all had siblings, perhaps yes or no. We all had school chums. We all had different teachers. We all read different books. We all watched different media. We all played different video games. And throughout all these experiences, we every now and then came across the word affectionate. Okay? And that word was couched within a particular context. So it would either be a context of a whole bunch more words, or it was couched within a context of watching somebody take an action. All right? So one person has had certain interactions, another person has had completely different interactions. And so now we try to speak with each other using the English language, but not conveying the same meaning. And what happens is, although we're speaking English, we are actually conveying a subjective collection of past experiences. And this can get really confusing because if your partner has had a very different past experience on a particular word, then they're going to act in a very different way than you would expect them to act. Right? So it's really important then for us to slow the process down and ask yourself, if I need my partner to be affectionate, what would my partner have to say or do that would give me the sense of their being affectionate? Or other words, supportive. What would my partner have to say and do that would indicate to me supportiveness? It's my subjective term, supportiveness or respect or affection or whatever. It's my subjective term, but I'm defining it by certain observable patterns that I can see in my partner. And so I need to be able to convey what is it that I would like to see. And so quite often I use this analogy and I say, okay, so suppose that I sent you guys home and we make a new reality TV series and we stick a camera in each one of your rooms watching you guys interact with each other, and then we beam your life out to all the rest of the Canadians. Okay? And suppose that one of the words that comes up is this word such as affectionate or something like that, and you give the audience a checklist of 10 different things that your partner would say and do that would give you an indication that they're being affectionate. And if you can actually make it extremely observable, what would they say, what would they do, then at the end of our hour-long TV program, our end of our reality TV program, if, say, for instance, on average, Canadians checked off 8 different points, then we would have to say, gee, I guess you're feeling that your partner is kind of affectionate towards you, aren't you? Okay. If, on the other hand, average Canadians all checked off 2 out of your 10, then we'd go, oh, I see what you mean, poor dear, right? So basically it would be a matter of, okay, so suppose we have the TV, we turn off the sound. What actions would you see that person do that would indicate affection or whatever it is? Or we turn the sound on, but we turn the picture off. What would we hear that person say? What words would they say? Would they say, I love you? Would they say, I care for you? Or would they say something like, how can I help you? And I get different definitions of what affection or other words might be when I see couples, right? And so it's really important to be able to convey that in a very concrete way as to what is it that you're looking for. So, here we go back to this idea of listen. And this is the example that I use to try and sort of hit home this idea of being concrete, being observable in what it is that you want. Many, many years ago, I saw a couple, and they had 2 really big issues. And we were basically able to solve their issues within 2 sessions. I think that's the fastest I've ever done couples therapy. But the first issue was this idea of listen. And so as I do with most couples when I see them for the first session, I bounce back and forth between each individual, trying to get each person's perspective on what is happening in the relationship. So we started with her. And it was a long time ago, so I don't remember what the story was. I just remember one key point. She's telling her story, and in the middle of her story, she says, he never listens to me. And I think to myself, okay, I'll need to get back to that someday. Finally, she finishes her story. It's over to him. He tells his story. It was a long time ago. I don't remember. back to her. She's telling her story, and again in the middle of her story, he never listens to me. And I think to myself, this is really important. We need to get back to this real soon. Anyway, she finishes her story. It's back over to him, who tells his story. Back over to her, and a third time, what does she say? He never listens to me. So now I'm going, okay, hold on here just a minute. Obviously, I don't understand something. And I wonder if he understands. So I turn to him, and I say, just out of curiosity, do you understand what she means by listen? And he says, oh, I want to warn you, this was a very conflictual couple, okay? So this was his answer. He says, yeah, of course I listen to her. I'm always listening to her. And I kept on looking at him. This is supposed to be a quizzical look on my face, okay? So I kept on looking at him with this quizzical look on my face. And I sat there in silence for, I don't know, it was 15, 20 seconds, maybe even more. Finally, the light bulb went off for him. And he goes, you know what? Right, maybe I don't understand what she means by listen. She's always nagging me to listen. And I go, oh, okay. So, what do you think we should do? So he turns to his wife and he says, dear, what do you mean by listen? As I said, they were a conflictual couple. She hit the roof. What do you mean you don't know how to listen? Everybody knows how to listen. And she just went on. Funny now. Back then it wasn't so funny, right? And she was just livid. Now, one thing you don't know about her is that she was a teacher and she taught small kids, right? So she finally turns to me very, very indignantly. She says, what? Do I have to treat him like one of my students? And I said, yes. And that's where the light bulb went off for her. So, she turns to her partner and she says, when I ask you to listen to me, I expect you to put your feet flat on the ground. I expect you to put your hands in your lap. I expect you to look into my eyes. And I expect you to nod your head and go, every now and then, as if you're listening to me. Now, how many of you had that definition, had those four things in your definition of listen? And imagine if this were your partner, how difficult life would be on something, in theory, as simple as listen. So, this is why it is so important to get extremely concrete about your subjective experiences. What is it that you want to see your partner say and do that would give you the sense of love, affection, respect, trust, whatever it might be that you want, okay? Hey, don't go away. You weren't listening. I said don't fall. Okay, now we get another one. So, the story is not over. So, she says, I want these four things, all right? And so, this was his reply. He said, oh, well, I can do that. And I'm thinking to myself, that's kind of a weird answer. And so I turn to him and I say, so, like, what normally happens in your relationship? He says, well, let's see, we come home, we eat dinner, she finishes up in the kitchen, and I sit down on the couch and start reading the newspaper. And then she comes in and she starts talking to me. So, I'll listen to, how are you guys feeling right now? I'm hearing some chuckles and whatnot, and I'm guessing that you're not feeling very listened to. He was listening to her. The problem was, is it didn't feel like listening to her because a key component was missing, and that was eye contact. And So this is, again, trying to hit home the message of it's important that we very clearly define things. If we run into problems, it's probably because we don't have a common language or common understanding on a particular word. So, sometimes, Fred, I don't think you listen to a word I say. Well, in this case, he's not. All right, we're going to switch here, and we're going to move into the second area where I see couples quite often get into problems. Again, this is sort of a general area. This is not specific problems that each couple will get into. So, we as humans, to form our society, we create certain laws, rules, regulations, morals, all these kinds of things. So, for example, you know, we have a law, that's the law of the road, so drive on the right-hand side of the street. Ever driven in England? We have things perhaps such as laws of social conduct, such as say thank you when you receive a gift. Well, how often have you given a gift and not received a thank you in exchange for it, right? So it's important to realize that these are human laws or human agreements, whatever you want to call them, and that if they're human agreements, they can be broken. So there is one law, though, that is not able to be broken. There's one law that is unchangeable, immutable. And that is the law of nature, and that says that everything changes. Everything changes. All right? Why is that important? It's important because you as individuals keep changing from year to year. What you want, what you like, what you, whatever, changes from year to year. And because you change year to year, then that means that the relationship is going to need to change from year to year to year. I mean, you have to think about what's it like when a couple first meets and they fall in love and life is all free and easy and all that kind of stuff, and then they decide to have kids. Whoa, now there's a huge change, right? Or we've had kids for many, many years, and now all of a sudden, all the kids out the door, off to college, and all this kind of stuff. Now all of a sudden, we've got an empty house. Well, you know, now what? So, I put it in a very harsh way here, and I say that because of this law of nature, that everything changes. That means that every agreement that we make with our partner is meant to be broken. And that includes, for those who are married, that includes a particular agreement that we made, which was till death do us part. Unless we renegotiate that agreement over and over and over again, we ain't gonna make it till death do us part. You need to keep on going back, checking in with your partner. Where are you at? Where am I at? How do we reach new agreements? So, every agreement is meant to be broken. You need to keep on going back and renegotiating all agreements. So, life is about compromise. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. Okay, well, maybe sometimes. No, always. So, when we're negotiating agreements, the first thing that is important to discern is, do we even have an agreement on this in the first place? Because sometimes what we have is expectations or taking others for granted. Sometimes we don't even have an agreement. And so therefore we need to verbalize that agreement. Sometimes we do have an agreement, it's just things have changed. We need to go back to that agreement and we need to rework, renegotiate that agreement. So I basically suggest that there are two ways in which we can go and renegotiate agreements. So the first is to basically incorporate the change right into the agreement itself. So I use a sort of a mnemonic with my hand, and I say, so suppose an And you'll have to excuse the stereotype. For those who don't fit the stereotype, which I'm assuming is most of you, excuse me, but I'm going to use the stereotype that when the garbage can gets full, it is husband's duty to drag that garbage to the curb, all right? And that works really well until change happens. And again, excuse the stereotype and the stereotype until change happens. We've had a recent change here. Hockey season started again. Now all of a sudden the garbage is piled up and husband is sitting watching the hockey game. So how do we incorporate the changes right into that agreement? It might sound a little bit like this. You know, you've seen these beer commercials 300 times before. You know how they're going to end. So when the garbage cans gets full and when there is a beer commercial on, you will go and take the garbage out to the curb. Okay? Easy. So that's one way to negotiate agreement, is just incorporate changes right into what is, work with what is, okay? Another way is throw the baby out with the bathwater and start anew. So it might look like this, okay? So now we have a whole new one. So it might sound a little bit like this. Okay, when the garbage gets full, well, you know, we've got some kids who need to learn some responsibility. Let's start handing out some chores to the kids. When the garbage can gets full, let's make the kids take it. That might be one way. Or another way that I might work with it is, you know, when the garbage can gets full, but there is a hockey game on, let's see, tell you what, I'll go and fill up and start up the dishwasher after the hockey game. Why don't you take out the garbage now? So there's another way, all right? Or it might sound a little bit like this. Well, you know, we each work, we both make reasonable money. I'm assuming you're wanting me to take the garbage out because you don't like taking it out. And you know what? Quite frankly, I don't like taking it out either. So why don't we hire a maid once a week to come in and throw our garbage out for us? Right? So again, throwing the baby out with bathwater, coming up with something new. The main idea is that it's the agreement that is broken, not your partner. Go to the agreement. Blame the agreement for being broken, not your partner. Does that make sense? So, one of the suggestions that I give to couples is I give them this suggestion: both right or both wrong. So, I'll compromise, I'll admit I'm wrong if you admit I'm right. So, one of the things that I ask people is since you were that high, what have you been taught? If I'm right, you're wrong. Is that true? You guys are all capable people, I'm assuming, right? You all got here somehow. You all know how to get groceries or something like that. You all know how to drive a car or something like that. You all know how to make dinner or something. I don't know. We all have our skills. We're all differently experienced. We all have a different way of viewing what's right and what's wrong for ourselves. But when you're with your partner, I say, play a little game with your partner. And that is, if you think your partner is wrong, make yourself just as wrong. Make yourself just as wrong. Okay? If you think you're right, make your partner just as right. Okay? Not, I'm more right than you're right. We're equally right. Because if you get two people who are equally right, okay, now what? Well, we have an issue here. Let's start working towards a solution. Let's start working towards that compromise. Let's start working towards a new agreement. Rather than having this argument, I'm right, you're wrong, back and forth, and I see that a lot in couples. Change the rules. We're both right, we're both wrong. It gets you very quickly to Okay, what do we have to create as a new agreement? All right? Okay, so then some resources as far as other things, as far as relationships are concerned. I'm a particular fan of this guy here, John Gottman. John Gottman's been researching couples for, I don't know, 30, 40 years or so. And he has looked at couples who are both successful and unsuccessful. He's got a great track record through his assessment process, and it is a very detailed assessment process. He can tell with 94% accuracy whether or not a couple is going to make it or break it. Them's really good odds, right? So he's got a lot of science behind his style of therapy. He and his wife have put together the Gottman style of therapy. There are other people out there, so the three big names that you'll see out there is John Gottman, you'll see Sue Johnson, you'll see Harville Hendricks. Sue Johnson does something called emotion-focused therapy. It's also a great therapy. And then you have Harville Hendricks, who does something called imago therapy. Again, it's a biggie out there as well. So if you're at all interested, there are some resources. I think, where's this at the end? I'll just skim through that. I think that's really good. Any questions, comments, concerns before we let you guys go? You want me to turn that off? Yes.